The brain drain you won't see until it's too late. The bridge alarm sounded once, then died. A junior inspector stared at hairline cracks she couldn't name, called it in, and got silence. 12 hours later, a detour sign went up. No explanation, no press conference, just cones and a memo. The veteran who used to catch these things had retired last spring. His replacement hadn't been hired. Here's the part nobody's tracking. What's leaking out isn't just people, it's competence. Judgment. The apprenticeship you call Google. We're walking into the next crisis with hollowed-out institutions wearing full uniforms. 3 things drive it: an exodus, a vacuum, and the catastrophe that follows. One decision years ago lit the fuse. Roadmap and stakes clarified. We'll follow a 3-part arc: exodus, vacuum, catastrophe, and move straight to why it matters. Why now? Burnout from the last global shock never healed. Science got pulled into identity wars. Media incentives moved from truth to engagement. Government layered targets until the only thing that mattered was the spreadsheet. Add harassment, legal risk, and a pay gap you can see from space, and it became rational to leave, not quitting, choosing self-preservation. What's the human cost? Safety becomes theater. Medicine becomes messaging. Infrastructure becomes a press release with a ribbon cutting. Truth becomes a vibe you subscribe to. This isn't abstract. It's the oncology nurse who won't work nights after doxing. It's the city engineer who knows which culvert floods first and isn't there when the forecast clips wrong by 6 hours. Here's how we'll prove it. We'll track data where it exists, but we'll stay with people. A virologist who locked her office door and cried before handing in a badge. A Metro editor who kept one story off the homepage and got sidelined. A bridge inspector who stopped getting time to walk spans and started clicking boxes. We'll show the replacements, the incentives, and the near miss that should have been caught. Keep one question in mind as we move. When the alarms sound next, who's actually making the call, and what have they learned the hard way? The expert exodus begins. Start with the rooms that got quiet first. County health offices where the fluorescent lights never turn off, where the walls are lined with outbreak maps and the coffee is always old. A medical officer who used to know every school nurse by name is suddenly doing press hits instead of field visits. She writes a resignation letter that thanks everyone and says nothing. Her badge still opens the lab door on her last day. She closes it gently, like that matters. Wave 1 was public health. Epidemiologists who could read a line list like a short story, contact tracers who could coax a reluctant phone call into a life-saving isolation, local medical officers who remembered the norovirus year when the winter formal had to be moved. They stayed through the first surge, the second, the third. Then came the meetings that contradicted their own field notes, the guidance they didn't believe but had to say out loud, the threats that slid from inboxes into home addresses. Some took leave, some never came back. Now watch the newsroom floor. It's 9:40 p.m., the Metro editor is on the phone with a lawyer, and a line producer taps her watch because the homepage slot is empty. The editor kills a weekly sourced scandal piece that would drive traffic but hurt a kid who didn't deserve it. 2 weeks later, his name disappears from the masthead and reappears as consultant. He didn't get fired. He got tired. The beat reporter he mentored starts filing threads on a platform that pays by the rage. That was Wave 2, investigative reporters and their editors. They carried the institutional memory that lets you smell when a document dump is missing one page. They knew which FOIA to file on a Friday afternoon to catch a nervous clerk. They could tell by the way a spokesperson took a breath whether a claim would hold by morning. When the business model shifted from subscription trust to algorithmic engagement, they took their notebooks and left. A few launched newsletters. Most learned to keep their heads down at organizations that had moved the goalposts to virality. Then the civil service, the regulator who's been in the same cubicle for 14 years, the one with a file cabinet that sticks and a map with a thumbtack for every bridge older than his dad. He used to visit sites in steel-toe boots and ask the question that wasn't on the checklist. Mid-career, not close enough to retirement to coast, not cynical enough to accept KPI theater. The job changes around him. More dashboards, fewer site visits, higher caseloads, less discretion. He gets a performance plan that says throughput. He knows what that means, he walks. Microstories tell the pattern better than a bar chart. A virologist spends a Sunday morning rewriting a memo so it carries the truth without triggering the headline she knows is coming. She locks her office door, cries until her eyes swell, and slides her access card across a table on Monday. A Metro editor who grew up stapling crime blotters at a Suburban weekly tries to slow a story that's missing context and gets sidelined to features. He still writes beautifully about farmers' markets. He no longer gets invited to budget meetings. A bridge inspector with a limp from an old fall stops crawling beams because there's no time. He starts clicking boxes on a tablet. He sleeps badly. Here's why this matters. Institutions don't just store knowledge in servers and binders. They store it in people who remember. The nurse who tells you an ICU ventilator's sound is off. The lab tech who notices a reagent batch smells sweeter than usual. The engineer who recognizes the harmonic in a riveted span hears it and says, "We're not going over today." When they leave, the documents stay. The judgment goes. And it didn't leave in a headline. It left under NDAs that bought silence for 2 months of severance. It left in LinkedIn posts that said "new chapter" and meant, "I couldn't do this anymore." It left wrapped in a fear that if you said out loud why you were stepping away, you'd be branded bitter or political or both. The pattern buried itself in nice emails and quiet farewells. You can feel the vacuum before you can measure it. Meetings take longer because nobody knows which precedent fits. Memos get safer because nobody trusts the receiver. New hires arrive smart, earnest, and untaught. They've got credentials and tutorials. They don't have the scar tissue. They think the dashboard is the terrain. They don't know where the first landslide always starts. Meanwhile, the people who stay carry more weight. They're the ones on call every weekend because they're the last who can. They cover 2 jobs and a 3rd inbox marked urgent. They train a rotating door of contractors who leave just as they're useful. They stop raising their hands in meetings because the last time they did, the slide deck moved on without them. They start rehearsing their own exit lines on the drive home. If you're looking for declaration letters, you won't find them. You'll find a city's outbreak surveillance lead listed as acting for 8 months. You'll find a regional grid control room with 2 operators on overtime again. You'll find a newsroom without a copy desk at midnight. You'll find regulators who used to mentor apprentices now answering procurement questions. You'll find empty chairs at the monthly safety review, cameras turned off, packets sent, no discussion. So ask it plainly, if they're leaving, who's replacing them? The next section has the answer. It's not comforting. The vacuum effect, who steps in and why it's worse. While those chairs sit empty, something else is happening across town. The seats get filled, just not by who you think. A deputy's nephew with a campaign badge, a loyal comms aide who knows the talking points, a contractor who's brilliant at deliverables, less keen on accountability. When the lights stutter at 2 a.m., the work doesn't stop. The discretion does. Start with the loyalty hire. He's smart, quick, and grateful. He owes the appointment to a handshake, not a track record. In the first meeting, he learns the script. Avoid blame, shape headlines, keep the numbers clean. He's told that decisions flow through the principal, not through field notes. He learns which calls go straight to the political office and which die on the voicemail tree. His calendar fills with optics. He starts measuring success by applause lines. Then the consultants. Their badge prints at 8:12 a.m. and a discovery workshop starts at 9. They map processes with rainbow sticky notes and promise a dashboard by Friday. It looks beautiful. It tracks inputs, not outcomes. There's a burned-on chart that rewards speed over sense. The site visits get replaced with surveys. The hard questions, do we have enough operators who can sign off at 3 a.m., become out of scope. The contract renews. Now add the software. The procurement deck said decision support at scale. In practice, it's a screen that turns red when the threshold is crossed. It doesn't ask why the threshold exists. It can't hear the wrong kind of hum in a transformer room or smell chloramine when a water mix drifts. It can't see the worry in a resident's face and ask a follow-up that unlocks the truth. It's quick, it's clean, it's wrong just often enough to matter. Funding strings pull tighter. Research dollars arrive with a smile and a clause. Align communications with agency objectives. Coordinate messaging through approved channels. Curiosity becomes compliance. The principal investigator who wants to chase an anomaly learns to schedule her curiosity between grant deliverables. The question that might embarrass a sponsor waits for next year, then disappears. Nobody writes that down. Everybody knows. Meanwhile, training changes shape. Apprenticeship takes time, and time is the only thing you can't expense on a grant. So the junior analyst gets the crash course, 6 SOPs, 3 e-learning modules, and a buddy who left last month. Then the phone rings with a real event. She has the dashboard. She doesn't have the judgment. She hears the tone in a county caller's voice and looks for a menu option that doesn't exist. Nobody trained her for silence. Here's a micro story. A logistics unit loses a senior planner to retirement and backfills with a project manager from a private vendor. He's great at Gantt charts, less sure about perishable cold chain under flood conditions. The first storm spins the river out of its banks. He meets the warehouse foreman at dawn and insists the pallets meet spec. The foreman says, "This road will be gone by noon. We load the smaller trucks now." The manager checks the SLA. By the time the trucks roll, the road is gone. Another, a junior communications officer, is handed the daily briefing during an outbreak. She's told to keep confidence high and avoid noise. She decides to smooth a confusing detail, testing backlog versus new positives, and inadvertently tells the public the wrong trend. The next day's correction lands next to an influencer calling it a cover-up. Compliance drops. The officer deletes her apps. She stops sleeping through the night. This wasn't random drift. Policies nudged it. Cost controls turned headcount into a line item to minimize, and contractors into an expense you can justify. Hiring freezes made vacancies normal. Centralized approvals slowed decisions until frontlines learned to act first and apologize later, or just wait and pray. Performance reviews weighted by metrics made discretion risky. A supervisor can defend numbers. She can't defend a gut call that saved a life but broke protocol. So gut calls disappear. Watch how incentives stack. A department learns that fewer reported incidents equal success. Reports go down, the incidents don't. A regulator is rewarded for time to close investigations. Files close quickly. Oversight weakens. A lab is told to increase throughput. Repeats get cut. The rare anomalies vanish in the noise. Everyone hits their targets. Nobody hits the truth. And AI, it's a tool, not a villain. But in hollow systems, it becomes a crutch. Leadership loves that it's objective. It inherits the biases of the data it trains on, the very gaps created by underreporting and KPI gaming. It learns that nothing bad ever happens on weekends because the skeleton crew stopped filing. It learns that outbreaks don't start in certain zip codes because those clinics closed. It reproduces absence. It feels scientific. It's not judgment. Meanwhile, field culture frays. The old hands who remain stop teaching because teaching without protection creates blame magnets. The juniors ask fewer questions because curiosity reads like incompetence in rooms where certainty is performative. Meetings migrate from whiteboards to decks. The last paragraph, "Here's what keeps me up at night," gets cut for time. Who benefits? In the short term, everyone with a quarterly report. Politicians get smoother news cycles. Vendors get renewals. Managers get green dashboards. Careers move. The system weakens, and when pressure hits, the empty core shows. This wasn't a single villain or a secret plan. It was 1,000 reasonable decisions that made the unreasonable inevitable. The vacuum didn't just invite worse, it rewarded it. And the bill shows up during the kind of failure a checklist can't catch. The incentive trap, how the system made leaving rational. Here's where the quiet math kicks in. The people who left didn't flinch first, they ran the numbers. What the system asked of them, what it rewarded, and what it punished lined up so cleanly that the only irrational move was staying. Start with science. Publish or perish was always a grind, then it became a game. You got promoted for counts, not corrections. A negative result you wrestled with for a year wouldn't move your H-index. A flashy preprint might. Grants began to read like marketing decks. Aligned to priorities, promised deliverables, hit milestones. The perverse loop closed, papers bred papers, not knowledge. Senior scientists learned to advise trainees on citation strategies before study design. The lab meetings got shorter on what's true and longer on what hits. When the incentives pick spin over signal, the scrupulous walk. And the risk rose. A researcher who flagged concerns about a sponsor's favored outcome found her budget rebid. Another spent months fighting a retraction no one wanted to hear about. The message carried without anyone saying it. Integrity is your hobby, the metric is your job. Add harassment that comes with being visible online, and suddenly every correction moves with a personal cost. The choice narrowed: compromise quietly or step out. Media had its own version. Audience capture wasn't a theory, it was a dashboard. Editors watched the traffic heat map and felt the floor tilt. Stories that required patience lost to posts that provoked. Colleagues got doxxed for headline verbs. A newsroom memo praised engagement wins and shaved resources from public records work. A reporter learned the lesson: one careful investigation buys fewer career points than 3 viral explainers. If your paycheck depends on clicks, your spine starts to curve toward them. The ones who couldn't stomach that curve left. Civil service perfected KPI theater. Compliance targets reproduced themselves like mold. Inspect X facilities per quarter. Close Y cases in Z days. Reduce reported incidents by N%. The trick wasn't to improve reality, it was to redefine it. You can reduce incidents by discouraging reports. You can hit time to close by closing early. You can pass audits by memorizing the script. The veteran who used to push for root cause got a review that flagged inconsistency with standard workflows. Translation: stop thinking. If you're the kind who can't stop, you become the problem. The door starts to look like an exit. Legal risk accelerated the calculus. One wrong line in a briefing could spiral into litigation, hearings, and a career on pause. Say the uncomfortable truth and you might violate comms policy. Don't say it, and you live with the moral injury when the harm you predicted arrives. Meanwhile, harassment wasn't abstract. It arrived in inboxes and on porches. Doxing moved arguments from meeting rooms to living rooms. Spouses and kids became part of your risk assessment. That's when a calling turns into a liability you can't justify to your family. Then there's money. The pay gap to the private sector wasn't subtle. It was the first slide in every headhunter pitch. Benefits used to close it: pension, stability, pride. Pensions got trimmed. Stability turned into churn. Pride soured into cynicism. A mid-career regulator looked at a contractor clearing twice his salary to ask him how his job works. He did the arithmetic. Rationality pointed out the door. Add centralization. Decisions climbed upward until the people closest to the problem became note-takers. If your judgment won't be used, your judgment atrophies. And because approvals took time, caution became a virtue. But caution without discretion is paralysis. People who like solving problems don't thrive in paralysis. They start to wither, then they leave. Training, too, shifted from apprenticeship to content. A senior operator who used to train 4 juniors over a year now onboards 12 in a week. He knows what gets lost. He hears it in how they describe alarms, by color, not by meaning. He flags it. Management asks him to record a video module. He does. The misses multiply anyway. He goes home agitated and looks at a posting from a vendor that values his experience and won't ask him to fake throughput. He takes it. Listen to a small moment. A county health lead drafts guidance with caveats: what we know, what we don't. Comms cuts the uncertainty because confidence matters. She signs a version that makes her stomach twist. The backlash lands. She fields threats while the senior comms person gets praised for message discipline. That night, she writes a letter to herself: I won't do this again. 2 months later, she resigns to focus on family. She's telling the truth. Her family asked her to stop getting death threats. Or this: a bridge unit sets a target: reduce out-of-service time by 20%. Engineers learn to defer marginal calls. A suspect bearing gets monitored. The inspector who argues for shutdown gets told to be solutions-oriented. He hears the subtext: stop blocking metrics. He updates his resume. The trap's elegance was brutal. It made leaving rational and staying costly. It framed prudence as obstruction, curiosity as inefficiency, dissent as disloyalty, apprenticeship as waste. It put the biggest penalties on the exact instincts that keep complex systems safe. You don't need a conspiracy when incentives do this much work. The result shows up where failure is unforgiving. Not in quarterly slides, but in the minute when the system needs a human who knows the edge cases and has the standing to act. That person used to sit in the 3rd chair from the window. That chair is on contract now, and the contract doesn't cover judgment. Fragile systems, where competence still matters. Here, where the margin still lives in people. Public health surveillance isn't just a database. It's a nurse who notices a cluster that feels wrong and an epidemiologist who knows which lab to call before lunch. When those people thin out, alerts slip. A clinic flags 3 unusual pneumonias. The dashboard waits for thresholds, but thresholds were tuned to last year's testing pattern, not this week's staffing gap. A senior disease detective would have called the ICU charge nurse and the wastewater lab. Instead, the alert chimes on Monday, and the weekend window is gone. Meanwhile, the data looks fine until it doesn't. Late lab entry smear time series, turning sharp signals into mush. A junior analyst trained to watch colors, not curves, concludes stability. The veteran would have checked lag-adjusted incidents and asked why one hospital's submissions went silent for 36 hours. That silence is a symptom. It gets missed. Aging infrastructure is the same story with steel. Inspections drift into checklists because checklists are defendable, but riveted spans talk in ways you can't code. A seasoned inspector hears a resonance at midspan and knows the dampers are lying. He stays, listens, and orders a closer look. Take him out, and the tablet check passes. A month later, thermal expansion opens a seam. Nobody saw it because nobody looked sideways at the green reading that didn't square with the morning temperature. Grid control rooms run on judgment under stress. Operators watch flows like air traffic, fast, dynamic, unforgiving. On blue sky days, the automations hum. During heat domes, when a plant trips and a wildfire eats a line, the screens go red across 3 states. The old hands know which neighbor will answer a call and which promise won't hold. They've lived the politics of shared reserves. They also know when to shed load early to save the system. Without them, the team waits for approvals while frequency sags. Black starts take days, and hospitals ride generators that weren't meant for it. Aviation hides its competence in maintenance logs and calloused hands. Experienced A&PS can feel a bearing with their fingertips and tell you it's a month from trouble. They log it, argue for the swap, and take the heat for schedule hits. Lose them and you get perfect paperwork on aging fleets with deferred items stacked under legal thresholds. A junior tech follows manual torque settings to the decimal but doesn't notice a thread that walks under load. The plane flies. The margin shrinks. Nuclear oversight is the part nobody wants to get wrong once. The veterans remember which alarms cascade into noise during steam generator testing, and which odd pairing of minor faults precedes a real one. They're the ones who'll pause a refueling outage to chase a faint vibration in a feedwater pump. That pause saves months. Without them, reviews are brisk, checkboxes are neat, and the plant restarts on schedule. Until the follow-up report after a near miss wonders why nobody pushed a little harder on an outlier. Across all of this, apprenticeship is the multiplier, not the course the hours shoulder to shoulder when someone says, "Listen to that," and you don't hear it until you do. The wastewater tech who teaches a rookie the smell of a sampling error. The bridge lead who explains why a clean photo doesn't mean a sound joint. The grid operator who drills a trainee on N-1 contingencies until they can run them half asleep. You can't accelerate those reps with a webinar. What happens when you thin that layer? Detection slides from early to on time, and on time is late in exponential systems. Diagnostics get less curious. Interventions get more conservative because nobody wants to own a bold call anymore. Performance looks fine until stress. Then the brittle spots show. Micro-stories keep it real. A county epidemiologist sees a spike in ER visits for GI complaints, but ICD codes are messy. She calls 3 ER charge nurses and learns a food distributor switched suppliers. She gets a traceback started before the lab confirms. Swap her for an algorithmic monitor, and you wait 2 days for the case definition to trip. A substation tech starts a night shift smelling ozone where it shouldn't be. He opens a panel, hears a faint sizzle, and radios for a controlled shutdown. The morning report calls it preventive maintenance. The outage that didn't happen never makes news. An airline crew chief notices an unusual rate of MELs on the same tail number. The items are unrelated on paper. He pulls the plane from service and pushes engineering to look for a wiring harness chafe. They find it. The Friday rush hates him. Monday loves him. Here's the quiet truth. Competence is cheap compared to failure, but it feels expensive in budgets and schedules. It takes headcount, time to train, leeway to say no, and cover to be the bad guy in the moment. Those are hard sells in performance cultures. You don't need a catastrophe to know this matters. You need a near miss, and one is coming. Not the spectacle you expect, but the small chain that almost breaks clean through. When it does, you'll see the outline of the person who should have been there. Case Study A, the almost disaster nobody saw.